So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday. I see that this is not on, so you can't see anything. So, welcome to Friday. Don't forget, of course, two things. Number one, Monday's a holiday, which I probably didn't need to remind you of, but just in case. Tuesday, we have a little quiz, right? So again, I'll do the online students at 10, and then in person, you guys will start at 11, okay? Yes, those are my announcements. So, yesterday where were we now? We were kind of all over the place because I had some videos to show you, but then I had a series of questions that didn't really relate to those videos very well at all. And I think what happened is that over time I've kind of changed my videos and changed what I've done, and somehow I had new videos and old questions, and it was kind of a schmoz, unfortunately. But hopefully those videos gave you a little bit of a window into how important mummification was for the ancient Egyptians. They went to a lot of trouble in order to make sure that the physical body of those people were preserved, right? And again, the desert helps them out. It's very dry, it's very warm, but they did a lot of extra work to make sure that the body preserved. What did we see them doing? Or what did we hear about them doing? What's that?
The brain into liquid.
Oh yeah, the brain into, that's, everybody always remembers the brain part. Yeah, kind of gross, right? Interestingly, the Egyptians didn't really know what the brain did. They didn't think it was very important.
Is it really a brain or just other part of the body that they
Well, for the brain, they thought it wasn't very important. And so, funnily enough, well, they didn't know. So, yeah, they put a metal rod up the dead person's nose and kind of broke through into the skull, scrambled it all up, and then you could just drain it out through the nose, right? Which is,
really a brain?
yeah. Oh, was that a brain? No, I think it was something else.
From other part of the body?
Yeah, no, I think it was just some sort of liquid. I don't know. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like flour and water or something.
And after that, I think they fill it with a plastic. Because it's a free place.
I don't know that they put anything into the skull itself. But what else did they remove?
The stomach,
Yeah?
liver,
Stomach and the liver.
heart.
Heart stays in, right? Because what does your heart do?
Kidney?
Kidneys go out too. What does your heart do?
They don't take out your heart, right?
They didn't take out your heart.
They just leave it.
Heart stays in. Because what does it do?
Because you can be alive with your heart, it can pump the blood.
Well, yeah, like but symbolically, what did it do?
Symbol of love or their life.
Well, I guess in some way it's a symbol of their life, right? I think they said it recorded all of your deeds, right? All of your good and bad deeds. So your heart would sort of allow you to be judged, so you kind of needed it with you, right? So they left the heart in there, but you're right, they took out all the other stuff, right? The stomach and the intestines and the liver and the kidneys. It turns out all of that stuff rots really quickly when something dies. And so, if you're a hunter and you shoot an animal, you kind of need to get the guts out pretty quick because they'll start to decompose fast. So the Egyptians knew that as well, so they removed all of that stuff, put them all in jars, right, to be buried with the person. What else did they do to the body? So they took out the brain and some of the organs.
They
Oil the
Oil.
body and bandage.
Yep, they oil and bandage it, but right before that, yeah, they would basically bury it in a pile of salt, right? It's naturally occurring salt called natron. They would basically bury the body in it and leave them for 40 days under this pile of salt, right? So all of the moisture just gets sucked out of this person. And then when they take off all of the salt, then, yeah, you're right. They oil them all up. They wrap them. They put various protective charms and things on them, and then whoosh, into the barrel. What's up?
It's like Wait in 14 days. It turns like a well done steak.
Oh, I'm sure they're like beef jerky by then. I'm sure you're looking at like dry pepperoni or beef jerky kind of. Yeah, people, and actually, I don't have the film, but I actually saw. I should look for it. I saw a documentary where they actually did it. So they had someone who had donated their body to science, so it was an actual dead person, and they mummified him. And so they did all of the stuff. They took out the organs. They buried him in salt, and they actually like went to Egypt to get the right salt to bury him. And then, so they did the whole thing. They mummified him for real.
Even they didn't modify it, like when somebody did this, what you say, they already just surgery their bodies,
Yeah.
and then like put it in the trash.
Well, that's the thing, right? Well, what do you mean, like in ancient Egypt?
No,
Or-
I mean that like Iranian.
Oh.
Yeah, Buddhist.
So what do they do then?
When somebody like somebody went dead and their family give their body to like scientists to do some like lab in their body,
Right.
and they just like labbing the dead body, and then after they give the dead body to family to like
Oh.
put it in the land.
Oh, okay. They give it back.
Yeah.
I see. I see. Yeah, I don't
If
know.
they don't want the like the dead man, then they put it in the garbage, something like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. Yeah, here in Canada, I think that you. Yeah, I don't know what they like. If you donate your body to like medical research, I don't know kind of how that works or what happens. I think most things get like if they're done with a body, they incinerate it, right? Like they cremate it because you can't just throw people in the garbage here. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I think they would probably cremate them, right? But yeah, so the Egyptians kind of went to a lot of trouble, especially the pharaoh, right? And there's a lot of preparation that's done. We saw in the video from a few days ago the creation of, or we will see, I think actually, how these tombs are created, and they're meant to never be opened, right? Those people are meant to stay there for eternity, right? Okay, that kind of catches us up. I have just a little bit of reading for you to do from our textbook. So you can see 4 pages there with 5 questions talking about ancient Egyptian social hierarchy and a little bit about the sort of historical periods of ancient Egypt. Because there's an old kingdom, a middle kingdom, and a new kingdom. Just for your reference point, some of the pharaohs that we heard about already, we heard about Tutankhamun yesterday. We've heard about Amenhotep. That's who Kar worked for. He worked for Amenhotep. Both of those pharaohs are new kingdom pharaohs. So just to orient you a little bit. So yeah, a little bit about social hierarchy and rights and freedoms, and then just what the old kingdom was kind of like. Okay, so just a few questions for you. I'm going to throw some time on the clock here to let you read and answer, and then we will discuss, okay? Alrighty, Rue. You may begin.
think so. Yeah, so that section, so yeah, you start there. And, oh, that's, yeah, so that question I'm asking you, what kind of things stay the same? Yeah. Right. I guess so. I'll leave it.
Okay, just one more minute, good people. One more minute. Okay, ready, shreddies?
Yeah, one minute.
What's that?
1 more minute.
One more minute. Okay, one more minute. Okay. So in this section, we hear a little bit about these sort of the Old Kingdom and the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom, right? And so I think what you probably read about was the fact that, well, I don't know, what was the Old Kingdom like? Hmm. So a belief in the pharaoh, which pretty much persists all the way through, right?
Marvels of engineering built on massive scale to honor the pharaohs and usher them into the afterlife.
Right. So we have this is kind of a period of it's a bit of a golden age, I guess, of ancient Egypt. This is when they build all of the kind of biggest pyramids as tombs for the pharaohs, right? Anything else important about the Old Kingdom?
They also like saw increased trade and remained a relatively peaceful kingdom.
They saw increased trade.
Like the pharaoh's government controlled trade with Egypt, exporting grain and gold and importing timber, spices, ivory, and other luxury goods.
Okay, so we start to see some very kind of extensive and lucrative trade with other areas of the Mediterranean, right? What about the Middle Kingdom? What kind of things are happening in the Middle Kingdom?
Middle Kingdom, they saw the reorganization of the state's bureaucratic apparatus to control the needs.
What does that mean?
Dangerous.
Okay, so So we see more kind of bureaucracy, more kind of written rules, kind of a formalization of the state operation. Okay. Anything else we see in the Middle Kingdom?
The pharaohs also moved their capital from Old Kingdom capital of Thebes, south of Greece, halfway between Upper and Lower Egypt.
Okay. So the capital is kind of moved to halfway between Upper and Lower Egypt. And I think that's important because there's kind of some turmoil in this period as well, right? I think there's a few situations where there's more than one pharaoh, right? There's a pharaoh in the north and a pharaoh in the south. So Egypt kind of breaks into two little kingdoms for a while. I think it gets invaded a number of times, right? And so it's kind of a period of, sometimes you have good, strong pharaohs, sometimes you have weak ones, sometimes there's two. Egypt is getting invaded from the outside. There's kind of a lot going on, right? And then what happens in the New Kingdom?
Some era of Egyptian imperialism, changes in the burial practices of pharaohs, and the emergence of a brief period of state-sponsored monotheism under the pharaoh of Akhenaten.
Okay, so we see kind of a bit of a return to glory, right? Kind of a newer golden age in the New Kingdom, but also changes in how pharaohs are buried, right? And they start to bury them in that Valley of the Kings during this period, right? And again, all of those, those pyramids are quite, they're amazing feats of engineering, but of course it tells you right where the treasure is buried, right? You know the treasure is buried under the pyramid, right? And if you can get in there, you'll get rich, right? And unfortunately it's too much for some Egyptians to resist, and all of those tombs eventually get robbed, right? And so they try to create tombs that are guarded and that are hidden away so that hopefully nobody will rob them. Spoiler alert, they all get robbed anyway. If you leave a bunch of gold lying around in the desert, people will find a way to get it, right?
Another thing that I saw in the note that in New Kingdom, the agriculture and the pastoralism is something I can say.
In the New Kingdom, something about agriculture?
The development, in the New Kingdom.
Okay, did anyone catch that? I don't remember reading it, but can anyone help us out here? No? I mean, the agriculture kind of continued all the way through, right? Because by the time we get to the beginning of the Old Kingdom, Egypt is already, kind of stratified, and it's got canals and irrigation centers, and it's got it's got intensive agriculture. All of those things are kind of in place already, right? So the first pyramids, I think, are built around 3100 BC, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. And by that time, Egypt has probably been, intensive, has had intensive agriculture for probably a few thousand years already. So it's kind of a long development until they get to pyramid building, but by then, their agricultural system is kind of working, and they have a stratified society and all of these things. Speaking of stratified societies, what is the social hierarchy like in ancient Egypt?
It was like that the pharaohs are at the top,
Yep.
and the farmers and slaves in the bottom. That means that the pharaohs are the richest,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Answer second question.
Yeah, that's the second question.
And then the pharaohs are the richest and the powerful, and it means that like this. And the slavers and the farmers in
They
the
have
bottom.
three classes of social classes.
Okay. Okay, so we've got pharaohs at the top, we have slaves at the bottom, we have kind of farmers, I guess, just above the slaves. Who else is kind of in this hierarchy? Yeah.
Farmers and
Right. So we've got slaves and farmers. We've got kind of soldiers in there. We've got,
After merchants is craftsmen, like arts people.
yeah, right. Merchants, craftsmen. Those are skilled workers, right? We've got temple priests in there, and we've probably got sort of some nobles as well, right? People from rich families or people who have high-ranking government positions. They're probably in there as well. And I think, yeah, I do have sort of a very simplified version of what Egyptian society looks like here, but yeah, I mean, probably most of, I don't know if you would say most people are slave. I think probably most of Egypt's population were peasants, right? We're just simple.
You mean that soldier is the top of the engineer?
Well, they were because, I think for the most part, Egypt didn't have a very big standing army. So I think if you were a soldier, you were almost more like a general, right? Like a military commander. And if Egypt was going to go to war, it would really be the farmers who were fighting, right? And the soldiers would kind of tell them what to do. And so, yeah, I think in this case, Egypt didn't really have a standing army, and so the soldiers again are more like generals or, yeah, high-ranking military officials, not just regular people. Yeah, so we've got all these kind of different levels, right? And there's merchants in there, probably some of whom are fairly wealthy. We've got scribes in there, right? People who can read and write, which is an important skill and probably not one that everyone had. We've got our soldiers, our generals, and then we've got people who are below the pharaoh, right? And they're in charge of, religious practices and rituals, but also in charge of kind of running the government, right? We have a vizier there who's probably like a president or a prime minister, kind of running most of the government. We've got high priests kind of telling those guys what the gods think about this or that. And then, of course, there's Pharaoh on top, right? So we have a lot of kind of different levels to this society. What about rights and freedoms for women? That's what?
Okay, the Egyptian women could own property and tax records show that they did. Egyptian women could also take cases to court after illegally done payments and
So, yeah, so women have some legal status here, right? They can own property, they can take cases to court, they can sign legal documents, right, and enter into contracts, right?
They
So,
can write their will themselves, and they can choose their inherit of their children.
yeah,
They have the plenty rights with the name.
yeah. So, yeah, this is definitely a society where men are going to have more power than women, but women do have, some rights here, right? The ability to kind of, they are legal entities, right? They can sign documents, they can enter into contracts, they can write their own will and pass wealth on to their children. They can have wealth, right? They can own wealth themselves. So, again, this is, what other, are there other freedoms that women had? Oh, they can get a divorce, yeah.
they had some financial independence, which gave them options to dispose of their own property.
Yeah.
They
And,
can have lands, they can manage them.
yeah.
Like the nurse.
Yeah, so, again, this is not a, this is not a situation where women are kind of equal to men in ancient Egypt. That wasn't the case. But for the ancient world, this is not bad, right? For thousands of years ago in an agricultural society, women have a fair amount of rights here. And as we'll see in the video after the break, there's some other kind of aspects of kind of equality of women or empowerment of women that's kind of interesting to think about too, but we'll get to that later. Anything else we should mention about freedoms and rights that women have? That's good. Victoria's given me the nod. What do we know about slavery in ancient Egypt?
The increasingly these slaves from the Middle Kingdom onwards, usually
Okay, so we see.
Can we, yeah,
Yep.
can we say like in Middle Kingdom, they have like a three group. The first group is like for conscripts,
Three groups for what?
like three groups of people.
Okay.
First group is conscripts and like the
Three
lowest.
categories.
Oh. No, because do you know what a conscript is?
Yeah,
What is it?
it means that like the people that was in like army
Yeah.
and like in something like that, and if like they get out from their work
Okay.
and you know and now we have it in Iran like when we shouldn't go to army.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can like return to Iran and something like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they have something like this.
Yeah, I don't know. There probably wouldn't have been anything like that in ancient Egypt because again, most ancient societies don't really have an army, right? They only have an army when they're being attacked, and then the army is, basically all the peasants, right? The peasants are armed and they're sent off into battle, right? It really won't be until the Roman Empire where we have like full-time professional soldiers, right? People who it's their job to be soldiers. So the peasants probably wouldn't get any military training, I don't think, unless I'm mistaken. Yeah, because again, most ancient societies don't have standing armies because they just can't afford to pay people to stand around and wait to go to war, right? The Romans changed that, but we'll get to the Romans later. But yeah, for the Egyptians, basically the army would have been the peasants, right? And so if they were needed, they would have been called up, put a sword in their hand, and send them off into battle, right? And hopefully they don't get massacred, hopefully. Whoops. No, here we go. Okay, so we definitely have slaves in ancient Egypt, right? They perform a bunch of different functions depending on who kind of owns them, right? So they might have been owned or used by temples. They might have been used by merchants or craftspeople, or used in construction, or sent off into battle if there was a war going on. They could be used for any kind of function, right? Anything else about slavery we should know?
Thousands of slaves were sacrificed to be buried with pharaohs.
Say that one more time.
Thousands of slaves sacrificed to be buried with pharaohs.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
So
they did it.
yeah, so some slaves are kind of sacrificed in order to go to the next world with the pharaoh, which is kind of crappy when you think about it. You're a slave in this life, and then they're going to kill you so that you can be a slave in the next life for the
And
pharaoh.
sometimes it's like volunteering. Someone volunteer to like die with them.
Ooh,
sacrifice for them.
maybe.
To be like slaves for them in another like group.
I'm not sure how voluntary it would have been.
But I saw a movie that it's like that. Somebody like they fight for volunteering to
Oh.
maybe sacrifice for their like.
I guess that's possible. I don't know. I don't know the degree to which people would have volunteered for that. Maybe.
Because the slaves are very like they don't like their work, and like I can say most of them like to be died. They don't like this like life.
That is a bleak concept, right? Yikes. Okay, so I think we've talked a little bit about characteristics of the Old Kingdom. Again, these are kind of, artificial historical divisions, right? And so, the Egyptians probably would have imagined, just a continuous history, but modern historians and archaeologists, it's helpful to kind of divide things up into chunks, right? So that you can deal with them better. It's very interesting that there's 3 because 3 is a very culturally significant number in the West. Everything seems to come in 3s, except maybe boy bands who seem to come in 5s for some reason. and girl groups too. But the 3 is a very significant number. But yeah, so these are kind of historical divisions, and they just kind of help to give us the very broad, a very broad idea of what's going on in Egyptian history, right? But again, for most of this period, Egypt is intact. It's quite stable in terms of its politics and its way of life. Yeah, the Egyptians kind of enjoy a lot of stability in their history, with the exception of some parts of the Middle Kingdom where they're dealing with invaders and stuff like that. Okay, so take a quick break, come back. I'll talk just very briefly about some Egyptian art, and then we'll finish up that documentary that we were watching with Carr and Merritt, because now that we know who they are, we want to know how the story ends, right? So that's what we'll do after the break. So take a quick 10, come back, and we'll deal with that, okay? Right. Let me share with you very quickly a little bit about ancient Egyptian art, okay? Because one of the things that we're talking about in this class is cultural expressions, right? Ways that people express their culture, and artwork is one of those ways, right? So we said that ancient Egypt has a fairly stable history, right? They're kind of tucked in the middle of the desert next to the Nile. They're really hard to invade. There's not lots of other civilizations around at the same time as Egypt is getting going. And so they enjoy kind of a long period of stability, right? Their weather is stable, their religion is stable, they're not getting invaded. And so, as you might guess, their art style is quite stable as well, okay? And so two of the things that ancient Egyptian art has is that it's very stylized and it's very symbolic, okay? What do I mean when I say stylized? Do you know what I mean? It's what? Not quite, not quite. What it means, has anyone ever seen The Simpsons? Of course, everyone's seen The Simpsons, right? Yeah, so imagine Homer Simpson, okay, in your head, Homer Simpson. Now, Homer Simpson is a stylized human, right? So you see him on TV, and you know that Homer is supposed to be a human man, right? Yeah, but does he look exactly like a human? No, right? He's very stylized, right? Even I think they have only 4 fingers, the Simpsons do, right? And so he doesn't look like an actual human being does, but we recognize that that's what he's supposed to be, right? He's supposed to be a human male. And so Egyptian art is kind of like Homer Simpson, if you will. It's very stylized as well. So we see people that are drawn, and we can recognize them as people. Some of these beings are gods, right? But they're stylized in a way that makes them kind of not true to life, right? So look how they're all standing. Does anyone stand like that? Like they're standing with, how's this guy standing? He's got like his feet are this way, and then like his torso is like facing forward, and then like the hands are out like this, and then the head is this way, and then they've got these weird kind of wavy fingers, right? Nobody stands like that, right? They're kind of like, it's almost like they were flattened between glass somehow, right? So we see this kind of stance all the time in ancient Egyptian art. It's a very odd way to stand, right? It's not very natural at all. But we see it basically all the way through the period. The other thing we see is the size of figures. Okay, so the size of figures here is more related to their importance in the scene. It's not really related to how big they actually are, right? So so here we have the pharaoh and his wife, and down there we have Anubis, right? But look how small Anubis is, right? If Anubis were to stand up, he'd be like this tall, right? But that's not how tall he is. It's just that he's less important in this scene, so they make him smaller, right? Same thing up there with all those characters sitting down. I think those are other gods, but don't quote me on that. But they're all shown quite small too, because they're not really important to what's going on. So the Egyptians kind of don't preserve sort of height relationships in their art. They make people bigger or smaller depending on what's important. Okay, so we see that happening quite a bit. So kind of a weird stance. People are quite stylized. And then we see like different sizes of figures as well. The other thing that's interesting is skin tone, right? We see this quite often in ancient Egyptian art. So this is Tutankhamun. So we heard about Tutankhamun in the videos yesterday. Really the only pharaoh's tomb to be found that is almost entirely undisturbed. And this is from the wall of his tomb. And so you can see this is the opening of the mouth ritual that they do when they mummify him. This is his wife standing on the right. There's Tutankhamun in the middle. And there's the god Anubis kind of patting him on the shoulder, saying, you know, you're doing good, pal. Keep it up. I don't know what he's doing. But there he is, right? Now, look at the difference in skin tone between Tutankhamun and his wife. Why do you think they're different colors? Okay, give me more than that.
Maybe
What?
some of them are slaves and they are.
Maybe, but this is his wife, right? So she's not a slave. But what were you gonna say there?
Yeah, no, just.
Okay.
Since women were supposed to stay in the house, they could trust sons who were married and men to be outside.
Yeah, men are generally found outdoors, right? They're outdoors hunting or doing athletic things or being soldiers or working. And so their skin is going to get much darker in the sun, right? Women are inside, they're in the house, they're taking care of things inside, and so they don't get as much sun. Or maybe they're not supposed to, who knows? But we see that show up time and time again, and I think I've got another example. Yeah, where men and women are shown as different colors, right? And again, it doesn't really have anything to do with race or ethnicity. It has to do with gender, right? With who stays inside and who goes outside. Again, here you can see the difference in terms of the size of figures. Of course, these aren't a bunch of like tiny little people, right? They're just showing another scene within a scene, right? And the height relationships are different. Yeah, you can see that going on here too. And of course, sometimes the same figure occurs in a couple of places, right? Because it continues on, right? They're showing time, right? The pharaoh is being led by Anubis there on the right. Then he's getting his heart weighed, and his heart is weighed correctly. And then there's Horus introducing the pharaoh to Osiris, right? The king of the underworld, with Isis and I think Nephthys behind him. What else do we see? Sometimes we see stuff like this. Sometimes things are carved in relief, which of course looks very cool when the sun comes across it and you can see all the shadows and things. So we see carvings like that. Ancient Egyptian sculpture is another way in which we see this sort of stylized form. And so if you look at these three pharaohs, these are three different pharaohs, and they're a little bit different looking, but does that look like anyone that you would see walking down the street? No, right? Their features have all they've been photoshopped, right? They've been Instagram filtered heavily. So none of these pharaohs really looked like that, but the Egyptians kind of made them look, I guess, perfect, to Egyptian eyes anyway. And so again, I'm not sure which pharaohs we're looking at. I think that's Amenhotep there on the top right, who they were talking about in the documentary. But, you wouldn't really know any of these pharaohs if they were walking down the street, right? It's not very realistic of people. So yeah, we saw that kind of heavy stylization in sculpture. And you also see this kind of weird stance even in the sculptures, right? So here is, I think this is the Pharaoh Khafre, which the second biggest pyramid is Khafre's pyramid. I think this is Khafre and his wife. And as you can see, like look how they're standing here. So Khafre is standing like just like this with his left foot forward.
And they give like the right leg.
Yeah, or it's always the left. Always the left leg forward. Standing like this. Does anyone stand like this in real life? No, right? And then his wife is standing beside him, and she's got one leg out too, but she's kind of like embracing him, but like this. It's pretty awkward, right? Yeah, nobody stands like that,
He
right?
shows his muscle,
Well, kind of. Well, he does look like he's in good shape, right? But again, it's very stylized, and it's very kind of, in a way, it's not realistic, right? It's a beautiful sculpture, but it's not a very realistic one. And again, like people don't really stand like that in real life, right? Nobody holds their beloved like this, right? That's a weird thing. But again, that's how the Egyptians sculpted people. And they did this again for thousands of years, right? The art style remains constant.
I think they are staying straight because they want to show they are serious. That they are serious.
Sure. So the stance of these pharaohs might have something to do with their formality, right? Their regalness, their strength. But what I wanted to ask you is, why do you think this art tradition stays the same for so long? Why do they continue to paint the same way and sculpt the same way for thousands of years? It's their it's their tradition, right? So yeah, I was going to show you this. This is a Michelangelo sculpture that you'll find. I think it's in the Vatican Museum, but don't quote me on that.
Vatican?
What's that?
Vatican? You mean that Vatican?
Yeah. So like where the Pope lives, the head of the Catholic Church. I think in the Vatican they have a number of Michelangelo sculptures. This is one of them. But again, contrast it to this, right? Where this is very stiff, very formal, very unrealistic. And here there's a ton of movement, right? This is a character who's fighting with some sort of serpent, right? And you can see the serpent wrapped around, and he's like, oh, right? He's, being overcome by this serpent. But you can see the emotion, right, and the movement. And then his sons are kind of helping him out, trying to fight against the snake, right? And it's an action scene, right? There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of stuff going on. And here, everybody's literally frozen in stone, right? So again, it's a different tradition, but one that remains very stable, right? And I think Victoria's comment about it being tradition is kind of important, because a lot of their art was religious in nature, right? And religious stuff tends to stay the same, right? There's a lot of religion doesn't radically modify itself every year. Religion is something that's supposed to remain fairly consistent. And because all of their art is kind of religious themed, they don't really change it very much. And so the stuff you see from the Old Kingdom, where they're painting and putting things on walls, is very much the same as what they do in the New Kingdom. Basically, with one exception, and I'll show you really quick because we're running out of time here. The exception to this is Akhenaten, and you've heard his name probably a couple of times. He's a pharaoh who, in the New Kingdom here, he's kind of battling against the priests of Amun. And Amun, of course, is Ra is the big god of ancient Egypt. The priests of Amun are getting too powerful, and they're kind of threatening the power of the pharaoh. And so Akhenaten says, that's it. We're changing the religious tradition of ancient Egypt to monotheism. So he's saying, all those old gods, we're not worshiping them anymore. We're just worshiping Aten, the sun's disk. And so he does it. He moves the capital of Egypt to this new city, which is El Amarna now. He changes the state religion so that the priests of Amun-Ra have no power anymore, changes his name, and sort of reboots Egyptian religion, if you will. And you can see the difference in the artwork as well. So you see these kind of things are kind of a little more curvy, right? Like Akhenaten here he has a bit of a belly, which is interesting. Most of the pharaohs look like they've just been to the gym. Akhenaten looks like he's a little soft in the middle, right? And look at the shape of his face. Look how curvy it is, right? He's got this nose and big lips and big ears, right? And you see that in a statue of him here, right? He almost looks kind of feminine, right? This is a really strange look for for an Egyptian sculpture of a pharaoh, right? And even his face is different, right? Much longer, right? A little more naturalistic. You may have seen this before. Probably this is probably his wife, Nefertiti. And holy cow, is this ever realistic, right? She looks like a supermodel. Would you recognize her if she was walking down the street? I think you might, if she actually looked like that, because that's much more naturalistic than the other ones, right? The other ones were very stylized. That's pretty naturalistic, right? If she actually looked like that, that's amazing, right?
What's about her ears?
Part of it just broke off, I think. Yeah, it's thousands of years ago. Yeah, and even a scene like this, like look how curvy it is, right? Look at the shapes of the figures, right? They're really curvy and their faces are different. And look at what they're doing. Can you tell what's happening in this scene? What's that? No, they're not really. They're not drinking.
They're giving meat to the baby?
Yeah, they're taking care of their children, right? So Akhenaten's wife has a little child on her knee, right? That she's maybe bouncing around, right? That's fun for kids. And look at Akhenaten on the left. He's got one of his other kids, and he's giving the kid a little smooch, right? And a little cuddle. You never see pharaohs doing this in formal art, right? Pharaohs are always like strong and, giving, honor to the gods and slaying their enemies and doing things like that. But here he's just having a nice family scene, right? He's hanging out with his wife and his kids, and they're tickling them and having fun and kissing them, and yeah, nice things, right? And so this is kind of interesting of Akhenaten too. Not only does the style change, but even the kinds of scenes that we see change, right? And so for a brief period, Egyptian art actually does radically change. But then Akhenaten dies. He might be assassinated. Probably is, actually. And so I had some more examples of this, but I won't go into it. He might have been assassinated, and then as soon as he was, basically, they swept back to what they were. So they brought back all of the old gods. The priests of Amun-Ra became powerful again, and they basically destroyed all memory of Akhenaten. So they tore his capital city down, they chiseled his name off of all of the monuments, and basically tried to forget that he ever existed. So there was this brief period of pretty radical change up, and then it went right back to the way it was, because nobody really liked what Akhenaten did. And so, but we know about him. Okay. We're not going to have quite enough time for this, but we're going to try it anyway. The last little bit of the video, I have some questions for you here. I'm posting them in Microsoft Teams, but let's start watching, okay? So online people, just watch from about 33 minutes to the end, although that will probably take you longer than the class, but we'll see what we can do with that. So go watch it. We're going to do the same thing here in class. And that's very interesting. We know we don't have enough time to finish this, unfortunately. So what we'll do is on Tuesday, of course, we'll have a quiz. Monday, there's a holiday. Tuesday, we'll have a quiz. And on Tuesday night, what I'll ask you to do is I'll ask you to watch this section of the video and answer these questions so that we can answer them first thing Wednesday morning, okay? So I guess if you want to do that on the weekend, you can. But if you want to do it on Tuesday night, I'll ask you to do it just so we can deal with this section of the video and then move on, okay? But it is kind of interesting to hear that, right? Because in ancient Egypt, they would have had all kinds of different cures for things and you know, prayers that were recited and rituals that were done if you were sick or if something wasn't going well. And undoubtedly, many of those did not work, right? You know, the cause of illness in a woman is not her womb wandering all through her body, right? We know that that's ridiculous and not possible. And of course, incense does not cure that either because it's not a real thing. But our host here mentions that, you know, maybe the placebo effect here is important, right? If you're not well, maybe even the idea that this is going to help you can help make you better, right? Even if the treatment is wrong and the diagnosis is wrong, at least your belief that it's going to help you might actually help you, right? But anyway, that's kind of all the time that we have. So I'll turn you loose, or for some of you, I'll wake you up. Turn you loose. Holiday on Monday, quiz on Tuesday. We'll finish up Egypt on Wednesday, and then we'll move on to India. Okay? So that's it. Have a nice weekend. Yes?
What are the sources for the exam?
For the exam, there are classes, I think I said class 9 to 17, which I think brings us to the end of Mesopotamia. And I can ask you anything we've done in those classes, I get to ask you. It's all fair game.
Is it like a written exam or like we should do?
Just like the last one. Well, I guess you weren't. Yeah, you were online. So for you guys, it'll be a written thing. You'll come in. I'll have 5 questions on paper, and you'll just give me the best answer you can. Yeah. Similar to what we did online, just on paper.
And can we like translate for some words?
Maybe. If you need help with a word, I can help you with it. Maybe. Okay, all good? Okay, that's it. Have a nice weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Try to get some, don't go out tomorrow because it's going to pour. It's going to be pouring rain. But Saturday or Sunday and Monday will be nice. So try to get outside. Go to Grouse Mountain if that's a thing you want to do. And I'll see you Monday, okay?